Robin Dorshow, and I'm the director of the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest, and I'd like to welcome you to our annual meeting. Thank you all for joining us. Just a quick word, so many of us, so many of our thoughts are with the situation in the Middle East right now, and I just want to acknowledge that and add my personal prayers for peace in the region. So thank you for being with us today. We are honored to have Susan Weinberg, one of our board members and the president of the Minnesota Jewish Genealogical Society, with us presenting. During her presentation, if you have questions or comments, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And now I'd like to introduce Jamie Heilicher. Jamie is our board chair, and welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, and welcome everyone to this Sunday annual meeting. Sorry about the attire here. I've been working outside in the garden, trying to clean things up before winter sets in. I just have a few minor business to attend to in terms of our organization. The annual meeting has been called to order. We don't have any new board members to vote in, but I will request a vote to nominate all of our current board members for another year. If anyone has any questions or comments regarding that motion, please throw your name in the chat if you have any questions or comments. Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a vote, and if I'll assume you're a positive vote for all of our current board members, unless you chime in on our chat to object to someone that is a current board member. I'll give it 10 seconds, and then we'll move on. All right, I don't see anybody chatting to object to any of our current board members, so all of our current board members have another year of active duty until we discuss any longer terms or any replacements or new board members. With that said, I'll close the official meeting, and I will introduce Susan Weinberg. Susan is an artist, an author, researcher, and frequent speaker on genealogy topics. Her creative work often involves storytelling and frequently explores family history themes. Susan is the president of the Minnesota Jewish Genealogical Society and serves on the board of the International Association of Jewish Genealogy Societies, as well as a board member and vice president of the Jewish Historical Society of the Upper Midwest. She developed an oral history project with elders at Sholom and created artwork on those stories, and authored the book We Spoke Jewish, a legacy in stories that include oral histories. And history on 3 groups of immigrants who span the 1900s. Susan writes frequently for publications on genealogy topics and does genealogy research for clients around the world. With that, I will introduce Susan to start our program. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm delighted to be here and to talk about something that is fascinating to me, and I am hopeful it will be fascinating to you as well. And that is how family got to the Upper Midwest. And I should put an asterisk after that because it's really the central United States. But we're going to focus more on the Upper Midwest with our examples because that's going to be the most relevant region for us. So let me move into presentation. There we go. So this is roughly the route that they would take today, which is essentially, I think, probably similar. They changed trains in Chicago, and it took probably about a day and a half to get there. Trains were a little slower then. So let's take a look at what the world looked like in 1900, because that's the period that we're going to focus on, is the early 1900s. New York had 500,000 Jews. It was the largest concentration of Jews anywhere in the world. and they were coming with increasing frequency during this period. They were located in the Lower East Side for the most part, and that raised issues around sanitation, disease, crime, and they were getting kind of politically involved, which made the established Jews a little uncomfortable because there were fears of anti-Semitism. So one of the responses to that was to create a program with a rather unusual name. It's the Industrial Removal Office. And by industrial, the industrial part was kind of a carryover from a program, an agricultural society that they had been doing, which was working to get light industry moved out of New York. And they just kept the industrial. So what were they removing? They were removing Jews. Now, it's not as nefarious as that could potentially sound. This was actually for a good intent to help immigrants assimilate into American society, which was harder to do if they were coming into an area with 500,000 Jews. So they were trying to get them into the central United States and working to relocate them to cities, help them find employment, and facilitate that transition. Now, the records that I'm talking about span 1899 to 1922. In 1924, there was a law that went into place that really shut the spigot of immigration for Eastern European Jews, as well as a number of other groups. They began to look at, they set visa requirements based on the percentage of people that came as immigrants in the 1890 census. So they were trying to turn the clock back to 1890, which shut off much of the traffic coming in. Now, what they did was they worked on immigrant placement and jobs. So they had kind of a job service and companies in different areas coming to them with requests for people to fill specific jobs. They have removal records, and that's where you're likely to find family. When we talk about removal records, essentially it tells where they lived in New York and where they were being sent to. What I find most interesting is the immigrant correspondence, because it really gives you the flavor of the immigrant experience. And we're going to take a look at several of those. There also are surveys of Jewish communities. And I want to take a look at some of the smaller communities within Minnesota as a snapshot in 1906. Now, many of those no longer exist. The program, the IPO, moved 79,000 Jews to more than 1,000 American towns and cities. And they estimated that it was responsible for bringing about 250,000 Jews to central United States, because each person that came brought 5 more. And they really marketed to them. They would ask them to, reach out to your friends and family. And they did. They coordinated with local Jewish organizations such as B'nai B'rith to help find employment and housing. I first discovered this when I was doing research in the Berman Jewish Archives at the U, and there's a folder which has all the correspondence. And then I learned much more about it subsequently. The program was founded and supported by the Baron de Hirsch Fund. Baron de Hirsch was a very wealthy gentleman who put his efforts into helping Jewish immigrants coming in, and he had a number of programs where they were trying to create agricultural communities on the East Coast and also in the Dakotas, I believe. So I'm going to show you how you can search, and we're going to do a few searches. The interesting thing about searching for this information is the index is in one place and the records are in another. So you have to know that before you search. You'll notice there's a link at the top. There is a handout in the chat, and something will come out subsequently as well. So you don't need to jot that down right now, but that's you go to the Center for Jewish History, and you're going to see I have put in an MN, and then I've also tagged it for just the Industrial Removal Office records. You can put in a city, you can type out the city. I found that when I typed out the state, it worked when I put in Minnesota. It did not work when I put in North or South Dakota, but it does work if you put in ND or SD. So they had a different convention when they did some of those, it seems. You also can put in the name of a person, but be careful because names were spelled many different ways, and there could be a variant. So you might want to put just the first couple letters and an asterisk as a wild card. I would suggest searching in a couple of different ways if you don't come up with something. So we start with this, then we hit search, and this is what we get, and it goes on for pages. You'll notice at the top, it says there's 1,393 records in this industrial removal office records in Minnesota. And that's Minneapolis, it's St. Paul, and it's many smaller towns as well. And so this goes on for pages. I did the same search with ND and SD just to see what else there was in the region. And there are 343 in North Dakota and 629 in South Dakota. Once I pull this up, I use the edit find command and I put in the name or the first couple letters that I'm pretty sure of, and then it will take me to the entry. Now, if you look at the entries that are there, they start out with the name. Some just have surname, but most will have the full name. They say where they're going to, and then it has box, page, and entry. That's what you want to jot down because that will help you find it in the actual records. Then you're going to go to Ancestry. Now, Ancestry, the records were scanned by the American Jewish Historical Society, so I want to give them credit for that hard work, but they are now held within Ancestry for access. And to get to this page, you go to at the top of the page when you first log into Ancestry, it says search, then you drop down to card catalog and it comes up with this, you type in industrial removal office. Now I would add Ancestry is a paid site. However, you can access it at libraries free of charge. So certainly the ones in this area. So I would suggest doing that if you don't want to get a subscription. You can do certain things without a subscription. I don't know how far I'll let you go with this. So once you're in Ancestry, you will see 11 categories, and we're going to look at a few of them. We're going to start with the correspondence because that to me is the most interesting because it really gives you a flavor of their experience as immigrants. So let's take a look at one. This is a letter where they, first of all, when they send people somewhere, they'd ask them, write back and let us know how it worked out. So this person writes, I've waited until I secured work before writing. And now I want to say that I like the city very much. It reminds me very much of my old home in Romania. The rooms are very large. There's a nice lawn in front of the house and a fine well that we draw water from. When we left, you gave us a circular asking us not to forget to send you our countrymen and friends if we found the place to our liking. So they were marketing. As I like the city and find it a very good place for people to make a good living, I'd like to have a cousin of mine sent who's a hat maker and out of work in New York where he's been for 8 months and finds it hard to make a living. And then he gave the names of the people, Julius and Annie Goldenberg. So we're going to take a look and see if we can find them. So this you've seen before. Now we're going to use edit find. And it comes up with Julius Goldenberg, wife's name Anna. So I write down box 8, page 129, entry 14207. And we're going to go find the entry. To do this, we want to go to the removal records because that's where you're going to find where they left from, where they went to. So that's series 2. This is what a removal record looks like. Now notice a couple things. At the top, it says box 8. Corner, it has the page number 129 and 14207 was the record number. So you're going to want to match those 3 things to know that you're in the right place. And you're just going to page through until you get to that page number. Now let's take a look at the headers and what it has. First of all, it has the number, which 14207. It has the date. It's not very legible, but it says during the month of, and so you can piece it together with the day. Remove from is the address in New York that they lived at. Remove to is to wherever they were going. And if you look at it, you can see, I see Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cincinnati, Atlanta, Birmingham, Indianapolis, Louisville, another Cincinnati. So it's all over the place. They need to state their name if they're married or single and their age. And then the names of family members who are with them. Now these 2, it's actually 2 on each side, squares. I'm going to come back to that because first of all, it's small to read. but I have an example that will illustrate it fairly well. And it's really if they're coming to see to somebody who's already been removed by this office. It also will ask their occupation. It'll ask where they're from. And a lot of times it's just going to say Russia, because virtually everything in Eastern Europe at this time was Russia. Although I see Hungary and I see, I think it's down Austria in here as well. And then it gives you a really key piece of information. How long have they been in the United States? And it's usually in months, because they're not getting people who are established. They're getting people who just came in. Once they're there for a while, they're kind of tied into the community that's there. So the point was to get them early. Now, this is the record. And if you look at this, it says the address, it looks like a 182 Forsyth in New York. They're going to Minneapolis. Julius Goldenberg, 23, married, and Anna, 21. It tells us he's a hat maker from Romania, and he's been in the country for 8 months. So it ties exactly to the letter. Now, this is another one that the correspondence is really quite interesting. This was unusual, I thought. It was from their correspondence in St. Petersburg. And they were writing, one named Louis M., I'm protecting his anonymity, from Odessa, emigrated 6 years ago to Fargo, North Dakota, leaving his old parents in Russia. As there are now 2 years that he sends neither letters or money to his parents, who besides are sick and without means, we request you to be so kind to get information through your correspondent what is the reason of his silence, and to urge him to care for his old parents. So they continue to impress upon him the importance of communicating with his parents in Russia. So it's like, call your mother. So first I ran across that one. The next one I ran across was one that actually in their letter said, we do want our parents, underlined. And this was two brothers, Abraham and Solomon, who wrote to the IPO in early 1909. And they had been sent by the IPO to North Dakota, and that was their intent was to improve the West. They were farming, but not with great success. And they now were asking the IPO to send their parents from Brooklyn and defray the cost. And the IPO wasn't jumping in. They said they'd provide the same deal they did to them and require $40 for transportation. Now, many of the jobs at that time paid like $15 to $20 for a week. So this, 2 weeks of salary was a lot of money. And they pled poverty. They were struggling. And there was an exchange of 3 letters back and forth. And then they get this back from the IPO, which writes, well, I appreciate the fact that you have worked hard since your arrival in Lair. It is nevertheless a fact that it is not unreasonable that you make extraordinary efforts to help your parents join you. And that was where the paper trail dropped off. And I was really curious, did they get there? What happened? On the edge of my seat. So I decided to look in the records and find out. And I saw 3 weeks later, the parents showed up on their way to North Dakota, and they were there in the 1910 census as well. The mother was. And I really, I'll never know, I guess, if they ponied up with $40 or if the IPO took pity on them and sent the parents. What was interesting to me, I was curious if they succeeded as farmers too. They ultimately, everybody moved to Milwaukee. And then when the mother died, one was in Arizona and the other was in New York. So I don't think farming proved to be a successful venture for them. I use this a lot when I'm doing research for people, and it helps to connect the dots, because you can have all the information in New York and the information here, and you somehow need to connect those 2 parts. So this was one where I was looking for an Abraham Katz, and I searched on the name, and it came up with Abe Katz. So it told me when he came, November 6th, 1907. So it actually put the date in this. Some of the earlier ones don't have that. And here again, I have box, page, and entry. When I pulled it up, I could see, I knew he went by Abram Yosef, actually. So you can see there's an ABR and a Y. So I was pretty sure I had the right guy, coming from New York. And what surprised me was there was a woman named Lena Chayet coming with him. Young enough to be a daughter. He had a daughter named Lena, and it looks like she was at the same address in New York. So family. but I really wasn't quite sure because I had found the immigration record from a few months earlier and she was listed as Lena Katz. So I thought, well, was she married? Maybe she was married in a religious ceremony, but not a civil ceremony. I couldn't, or was she just trying on the name for size? I knew that she did eventually marry a Hyatt. So I decided to do a little searching and see if I could find something more. And I went to, this was from the top of the page that the little boxes we couldn't read very well. The top line is hers, and it says families removed after head formerly removed. And then the other one that has a hash mark is joining husband sent by us. So I assumed she was either going to a fiance or a husband. That's all I knew at that point. So I went back and I did a search on Hyatts coming to Minneapolis, and I came up with an Usher Hyatt, January 16th, 1905. So it preceded hers. And this is one where the page was missing, so I couldn't actually get to the ultimate record. But I did have the alien registration record, and in that it says his date of arrival was December 1904. So very shortly after, which is typical of these records, he came to Minneapolis, and a couple years later, she shows up. And when I put it all together, they arrived June 28th, the whole family, except for the older sons who came separately. And then a couple months later, 3 or 4 months later, Abram Yosef and his daughter Lena go to Minnesota. Within a week of getting there, Lena and her fiance, Harry Hyatt, get a marriage license. And a couple weeks later, they get married and they raise 5 sons in Minnesota. Abram Yosef returns to New York because he still has a family there. And we find him in the 1910 and 1915 census. But sometime between 1915 to 1917, Abram and Dora returned to Minnesota because Abram dies in 1917. He's buried in Minnesota. There's a whole family enclave by this point, and Dora lives first with one child and then with another. So it gives us the flow of the experience, and it connects the New York to Minnesota. So I want to take a quick look at some of the job offers and what they contain. So we'll look at a few things here. This is Guterman Brothers. There's quite a bit from them. And they had first contacted the IPO with a number of jobs. They wanted 25 girls to work in these jobs. The IPO said to them, we don't place young women in employment. We will place families or young men. So they decided to take a different tact. They said, in such cases where the father of the family was an expert mechanic, we would endeavor to place such a man. In doing so, we are, however, only anxious to secure a man who has 1 or more daughters who are willing and able to work as stitchers. So I don't know what their success was with that, but they kept coming at it creatively. There also was correspondence from the Industrial Removal Office to the companies. And this was one where the IPO wrote, Mr. Labatsky desires us to write to you on his behalf and ask you whether it would make any difference if he would refrain from working on Saturdays. He's a very pious Jew, and at his age, 54, it would be too much to ask him to make so radical a change in his religious life as to violate the Sabbath. And the Cook Skirt Manufacturing Company replies, we're pleased to know you were taking such an interest in this matter, as we are Jews ourselves. We do not feel we could compel anyone to work on the Sabbath day. Please tell Mr. Labatsky that he's at liberty to work on the Sabbath or not. So I thought that was interesting. A lot of the businesses were Jewish-owned businesses that they were finding employment in. And finally, I want to tell you a little bit about the surveys of Jewish population. These are kind of one-page snapshots of what different communities looked like at that time, because they were trying to gather information on, what was available in the Jewish community. So I looked at the ones in Minnesota, many of which, the smaller ones, really don't have a Jewish community anymore. But let's take a quick look. Winona. They start out with distance from New York because that was the epicenter, of course. Total population was 25,000. There's 50 Jews, 2/3 of which were foreign. One Orthodox congregation, which seems to be the theme, and nothing else. Eveleth, one Orthodox congregation, there's 7,000 population, and the foreign Jewish population, 2 Galician families, 1 German, 10 Lithuanians, and 6 Russian families. So they actually can count them pretty easily. JHSUM, 5,000, 90 were Jewish, mostly Russian, and they had an Orthodox congregation and 1 Hebrew teacher. And they also noted it's very cold in winter. And Hibbing had 8,000, of which 25 Jewish families were part of that, and 1 Orthodox synagogue and 1 lodge. So that's, when you're looking at smaller communities, that was what was typical. By contrast, if you looked at Duluth, you saw a 75,000 population, 400 Jews, who tended to be Polish, Russian, or Romanian. And then they go on to say they had 2 Orthodox synagogues, 1 Reform, 3 Hebrew schools, 5 lodges, 1 social club. They had a community. So in summary, let me tell you the takeaways. Just if you want to go check this out yourself, you're going to start with the Center for Jewish History. You're going to search the index by the city or a 2-letter state code or a surname, and use be aware of spelling variants in the name, and use wildcards if you need to. Then you're going to use the edit find command to find a specific name. You'll write down the box, the page, and the entry number. You'll take that to ancestry.com. May go to your local library if you don't have a subscription. Go to search, card catalog, type in industrial removal office, and then click on the removal records, select the box, search for the page, and find the entry number. And from that, you'll be able to identify when they arrived in the US, where they lived in New York, when they came to the upper Midwest, or wherever they ended up, who came with them, the country they came from, professions, and ages. And you'll be able to connect the dots between New York and their destination. So with that, I would be happy to look at questions, and I see we have a few of them. Let me close this out. Okay. Oh, my questions disappeared. Oh, they moved. Okay. So Abe and Lena are your cousins. I see, David. So that's very interesting, really fascinating. Yeah, and he goes on to say aunts and uncles, they had a farm in present-day Blaine, which ties out to what I saw. We'll have to talk more on that. Any other questions? I can pull up the site if you want to try a search or two. Okay, and I see we have the handout in the chat, so please check that. And I'm going to go really quickly, if we have some time, I'm going to go to the site itself. If I can get into there right now, let's see. Yeah, I think I'll hold on that. It's not going to be as accessible as I hoped. Okay, oh, I see more questions coming. Jews did come through Canada, and I know they also came through New Orleans. I was just talking with somebody about that, and we wanted to learn more of the story behind that. A lot of Jews actually did come through Canada, and they crossed over. There were border crossings, late 1800s, 1890 something. That would mirror the records that you would see if they came into New York. And they may have gone from there to New York. That would have been quite likely. Okay, I'm seeing somebody noted that their chat was disabled, so I don't know if that's true for other people. So what if they came into the US from another city like Galveston? If they found themselves in New York, I mean, it wasn't that they necessarily had to come into New York, but they had to be in New York for the program to be eligible for the program. The program in Galveston, the Baron de Hirsch also was involved with funding some of those efforts. I am not, okay, the question is, my maternal grandparents came through Galveston and Montreal, never touching New York City. Are there comparable sources? This was really based in New York, and I'm not aware of comparable sources. The focus was really very much, not just on getting people to central United States, but getting them out of New York. So that was a big part of it. and is there industrial removal office for Jews? Yeah, again, with Galveston or initially through Montreal. And there is not. I think with Galveston, there was some assistance in finding employment, but it wasn't the same type of program. And initially through Montreal, many people who came across Canada would have gone to New York ultimately. So if they were in New York, they would have been able to access that. And I see a list of small towns in Minnesota that accepted people through IRO. Maybe I should try to pull the site up because I could show you that more easily. Let me hold on that and we'll come back to that. Can you search? Okay, and here we have a search. Okay, let me go in and pull something up to show you if you bear with me just 1 second. Actually, I'm going to show you the way I usually get into this. So Zoom. Okay, I go to the MNJGS site because I know where it is. So I go mnjgs.org because it's easier for me to remember that. And then what I do is I go to resources. So this is the easy way. And I go down to the Center for Jewish History, down here in the New York ones, click on Ackman and Ziff family. There you go. So now let me go back and pick up what the name was that we wanted to take a look at. Okay, Nathan Schoenberg from Rochester. Well, you know, Rochester isn't going to work. It has to be in New York, New York. So I don't think that's one we can use. So sorry, Carol, that's not going to work. It's strictly from New York City. We can see if there's a Schoenberg if you want to just try to test it out, but and let's search by name and just see what comes up. Schoenberg. And I'm not going to even say industrial removal office. We'll just see if we get anything. And what was our first name on that one again? Let's see. Was it a Nathan? Okay. So see, that's pulling from everywhere, and it's pulling from all the different resources. If you want to just get industrial removal, go to that, and there is not one in there. One that I did another one that I was doing for a client was, sorry, I got to move these bars out of the way so I can get to controls. I did one for Hoffman. I was looking for a Harry Hoffman, and we'll go into you can see industrial removal office. And I knew that he got married in 1903. I found a marriage record and I was trying to verify if that was in fact the right person. And I went here and I came down here and it was exactly the right person. So I knew H. Hoffman was marrying an Ernestine who became an Esther, and they were going to St. Paul. So that's how I would go about testing it. You know, you can, I haven't been using the edit find, and I don't think you can see me as I do it. But if it's a screwy name and it's going to be hard to find by the spelling, I will just put in the state code and then work from that. So let's see if we have some more. No, I think that is about it. Let's see, Galveston. Yeah, the Galveston, I see a note. The rabbi met every boat for 4 years. Yes, I know about that. It's a very interesting story. And okay. Sorry, I'm just looking to see if I've missed any. The list of small towns in Minnesota, we can take a look at that. And there's a question. Uncle Charlie went east through Siberia, participated in the Alaska Gold Rush, went south from Saskatchewan to the upper Midwest, and brought everyone else over. Grandfather settled in Aberdeen, South Dakota, the rest of the family in Minneapolis, the Ribnick Fur Company. How can I verify this story? Before we move to small towns, let me take a quick look at let's do a search for Ribnick. and just see what comes up. So sometimes you want to search broadly and just see if you find other names that you don't know of that you maybe should be looking for. Did it not like? Oh, it came up with two. So it has a Jacob Ribnick and an Archie Ribnick. Jacob went to Minneapolis. So that is one that you might want to take a look further at. And I don't know if that's the name that you're specifically looking for, but it would be worth checking it out regardless. And small towns, we want to take a quick look at that. And you said settled in South Dakota. Let me widen that. Let's look at South Dakota also on that and see if we find anything. So let's go back. Well, no, that picked up everything there was, so there's nothing else. Okay, small towns. Let's go back to MN, and we're just going to see what it shows us in Minnesota. I know like Winona was one of the towns that we talked about. So I'm going to do edit, find Winona. Oops, don't want, wait, now I can't see where the Winona. Okay, so it's going to, you can search by the name of the town and it'll show you what's within it. It says 2 of 3 matches. So we have a couple. So that's how you can search for other towns in here. They're all just in the list. If you're a member of MNJGS, I actually have listed out all the names so you can see if the name shows up on the member page. But aside from that, this is the best way to do it. So I think let me make sure we don't have any more questions, and then I am going to close this out. So Sarah Schaefer from New York City. We'll do one more search. To Minneapolis, I'm assuming that is. Oops. Okay, I'll do an edit find, which I might not spell it right. SCHAEF. Doesn't like it that way. So this is where the names become hard to search on. So let's go back. Yeah, that's one. I mean, you can put in Sarah Schaefer or just Schaefer, but maybe spell it that way. See if that finds us anything. Some of it. Okay, so you have this spelling, but we don't have the state restriction. So you're going to have to do a search, an edit find to find MN. And it says not found. So I don't think it's picking anything up with that, but you'd have to experiment with some different spellings. So that's a good example of where we need to do that. And let me see what else. Oh, we're still coming. Nope. Let's see. Did Jews who came through Canada also come through IRO? If they went to New York, they could have used it. Yes. And I think that is it. So let me stop share. And I will turn it back over to Jamie. Oh, there.
Hi, actually, it's Robin taking over. Hi.
Okay.
Susan, thank you so much. That was wonderful, as always. Susan is a wonderful resource for any of you with further questions. She's the best. So thank you. And we appreciate all of you joining us today for our annual meeting. If you are not receiving our emails, so you know about different programming, I encourage you to look at our website, www.jhsum.org, and sign up to receive our emails. Send us an email if you have any questions, comments, or otherwise, and we hope to see you at future events. And everyone have a lovely Sunday and a good week. Thank you.